I watched the confirmation number flash on my screen. Payment complete, $1.02 to $5 million. The final wire transfer for the distress note on the estate at 42 King Street. I didn't feel joy. I felt the specific quiet satisfaction of a ledger finally balancing. I closed my laptop. The only sound in my office, the hum of the air conditioner fighting the Charleston heat. Then my phone rang. Richard, my father. I answered on the second ring, expecting the usual update about the humidity or a vague question. About when I'd be visiting next. Jasmine, he said, his voice wasn't warm. It was brisk, the tone he used when ordering wine he couldn't afford. We need to discuss the engagement gala next weekend. I have my flight booked, I said. I'll be there Friday. Actually, that's what we need to talk about, he interrupted. Your mother and I have been discussing it. Tyler's fiancée. Her family is very particular, very traditional. They value warmth, harmony. I waited. I knew the silence made him uncomfortable. We think it would be best if you didn't attend, he continued, rushing the words now. Your energy, Jasmine, it's too transactional, too cold. We don't want anything distracting from Tyler's moment, this deed transfer. Gifting him the house, it needs to be a perfect moment. I sat very still. You're gifting him the house, I asked. Yes, as a wedding present. It secures his legacy. We know you understand. You have your career, you don't need the help. Tyler needs this foundation. He didn't ask, he informed. He was giving away the asset I had just spent 5 years paying for, and he was banning me from the celebration because my presence was an inconvenience to his fantasy. I see, I said, so the house is his and I'm not welcome. It's for the best, he said, sounding relieved that I hadn't screamed. We I'll send you photos. He hung up. I stared at the phone. I didn't cry. I didn't throw it across the room. I simply opened my laptop again. I pulled up the folder labeled King Street Holdings. I looked at the deed. I looked at the wire transfer receipt. I wasn't just the sister they didn't want. I was the bank they didn't know they owed. And the loan was about to be called due. Before I tell you how I turned their celebration into a courtroom drama, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. Have you ever been the one paying the bills but still treated like an outsider? To understand why I held the deed, you have to understand 42 King Street. It wasn't just a house. It was a crumbling monument to my parents' delusion. From the street, it was a masterpiece of Charleston historic preservation, double piazzas, gas lanterns, Jasmine climbing the wrought iron gates. But inside, it was a slow-motion collapse. The plumbing groaned, the roof leaked into buckets hidden behind silk drapes, and the air always smelled faintly of old paper in desperation. My parents, Richard and Patricia, treated the estate like a member of the nobility that required constant tribute. They didn't have jobs, they had interests. My father consulted for non-profits that never launched. My mother curated social circles, and then there was Tyler. Tyler was the golden child, the idea man. He was charming, handsome, and functionally useless. He moved from one failed venture to another, a bespoke surfboard company, an app for artisanal ice cream, a cryptocurrency arbitrage fund. Each failure was funded by leveraging the equity in the house. I was the opposite. I was the utility player, the one who made sure the tax returns were filed and the lights stayed on. I was the forensic accountant who tracked every penny while they threw dollars out the window. 5 years ago, the math finally caught up with them. I found the foreclosure notice buried under a stack of Architectural Digest magazines in the foyer. They were 90 days past due. The bank wasn't interested in their pedigree. They wanted the asset. My parents were paralyzed. They didn't have a plan. They just had indignation. That was when I made the decision that defined the next half-decade of my life. I didn't offer to pay their bills. I knew they would just spend the money on appearances. Instead, I formed an anonymous LLC, King Street Holdings. I approached the bank directly and bought the distress note. I told myself I did it to protect my credit rating or to keep a roof over their heads. But that was a lie. I was acting out a survival mechanism I had learned in childhood. It's a specific kind of financial Stockholm syndrome. You believe that if you can just become the essential infrastructure of your family's life, if you become the foundation, the walls, the checkbook, they will finally have to value you. You think you are buying safety, but really you are paying a ransom for love they are incapable of giving. I thought if I saved the house, I would finally be part of the US they were always protecting. So I became their landlord, though they never knew it. I let them believe a private investor had taken an interest in the property's historical value and restructured the loan out of benevolence. I let them maintain their dignity while I worked 80-hour weeks to service the debt. I paid $1.02 to $5 million over 5 years to keep their fantasy alive. I watched them celebrate their luck. I watched them praise Tyler for his resilience during the hard times. While I sat at the dinner table, exhausted, silently calculating the interest rates in my head, I thought I was investing in my family. Now, looking at the empty folder on my desk, I realized the truth. It wasn't an investment, it was an expense, and I was done subsidizing their reality. I didn't storm into my parents' house, I didn't send an angry text. I simply picked up my briefcase and drove to the one place in Charleston where I knew logic still existed. Uncle Douglas's study. Douglas was my father's older brother, but they couldn't have been more different. My father collected debts. Douglas collected facts. He was a retired federal judge who viewed emotion as an inefficiency in the pursuit of justice. When I arrived, he was sitting in his leather armchair reading a biography of Tud Marshall. He didn't get up, just gestured to the seat opposite him. "You look like a woman who's just found a discrepancy in the books," he said, closing his book. "Bigger than a discrepancy," I replied, setting my laptop on his desk. "I need you to look at something." I opened the folder, not the sentimental photo albums my mother loved, but the digital trail. I showed him the LLC operating agreement for Street Holdings. I showed him the wire transfer receipts for $1.02 to $5 million over 5 years. I showed him the text message from my father uninviting me from the engagement gala. Douglas put on his reading glasses. He went through the document slowly, his expression unreadable. He checked the dates. He cross-referenced the LLC registration with the deed transfer I had executed 5 years ago to stop the foreclosure. Finally, he looked up. "They don't know?" he asked. "No," I said. "They think King Street Holdings is an anonymous investment group that took pity on them. They think they're tenants with a very generous landlord, and now they want to gift the property to Tyler." "Yes." Douglas took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Legally, they can't gift what they don't own. They are attempting to transfer a title that belongs to this LLC, which belongs to you." "I know," I said, "but they've already announced it. Tyler is telling everyone at the country club that he's the new owner. They're building a life foundation that doesn't exist." "So what is your move?" he asked. "Do you tell them quietly, save them the embarrassment?" I looked at the text message again. "Your energy is too transactional." I said I was going to transfer the deed to them for $1 once the note was paid. I was going to let them be the heroes, but they uninvited me, Douglas. They took my money, saved their reputation, and then cut me out because I wasn't warm enough. So I'm not the sister anymore," I said, my voice steady. "I'm the bank, and the bank is calling the loan due." Douglas looked at me for a long moment, then a small terrifying smile appeared on his face. "Well then," he said, reaching for his phone, "we better call a process server. If we're going to evict your parents, we should do it by the book." Before I authorized the nuclear option, I owed myself one final variable check. I needed to confirm beyond a reasonable doubt that my parents were incapable of redemption. So 2 days before the gala, I drove to the estate. I didn't call ahead. I still had a key, the old brass one that stuck in the humidity. The house was buzzing with the frantic, expensive energy of a staged production. Florists were hauling in crates of white hydrangeas. A catering crew was polishing silver on the lawn. Standing in the center of the chaos was my mother, Patricia. She was holding a clipboard directing traffic with the imperious wave of a woman who hadn't paid a utility bill in 5 years. "Jasmine," she said when she saw me. She didn't smile. She looked annoyed, like a director spotting a stagehand wandering onto the set during a performance. "I thought your father told you we needed space. This weekend is about energy and yours is heavy." "I'm not staying," I said, walking past a towering floral arrangement that probably cost more than my first car. "I just wanted to ask you one question. Do you know that you can't gift the house to Tyler? Do you understand that the deed isn't yours to give?" She sighed a long, theatrical exhale. She turned to the wedding planner and whispered something about family drama before guiding me into the library. "You're obsessed with technicalities," she hissed, closing the pocket doors. "LLC's notes, deeds. It's so vulgar, Jasmine. We are securing your brother's future. Why can't you just be happy for him? It's not a technicality, Mother, it's theft. I paid $1.02 to $5 million. You are giving my asset to him." She looked at me then, and I saw it. The look wasn't guilt, it was pity. There is a concept in psychology called narcissistic extension. It explains why parents like mine idolize the child who achieves nothing and devalue the child who sustains them. To Patricia and Richard, Tyler is the mirror they want to look into. He is handsome, charming, and projects the image of leisurely wealth they desperately covet. He reflects their fantasy of who they are, aristocrats too good for labor. I am the mirror they hate. I reflect their reality. My presence reminds them of the bills, the foreclosure notices, and the fact that they are incompetent. Every time I pay a debt, I am proving they failed. They love the show, but they despise the stage manager who keeps the lights on. They had to give the house to Tyler because giving it to him validated their delusion. Giving it to me would have been admitting they were bankrupt. You have always been jealous of him, she said, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Tyler needs this house to build his legacy. He needs the standing. You have your little career, you have your numbers, you don't need help, you're fine alone. The sentence hung in the dusty air of the library, you don't need help. It was the ultimate dismissal. My competence was the justification for their neglect, because I could survive without them. They felt entitled to strip me of everything to feed the son who couldn't survive at all. You're right, I said. The anger evaporated, replaced by a cold Arctic clarity. I am fine alone and Tyler does need help. It's a shame he's not going to get it. What is that supposed to mean? She snapped. It means enjoy the party, I said. I'll see you Saturday. I walked out. I didn't look back at the hydrangeas or the silver. I got into my car and called the process server. The grace period was over. Saturday arrived with the humid brilliance of a low country spring. I dressed with the same precision I used for a federal audit, a sharp black suit, heels that clicked ominously on stone and zero jewelry. My accessory was a man named Mr. Henderson, a process server who looked like a linebacker in a cheap blazer. We parked on the street just outside the gates of 42 King Street. I could hear the string quartet playing Vivaldi. The driveway was lined with Bentleys and Range Rovers. Tyler's fiancée Eloise came from a family that owned half of Atlanta's commercial real estate. This party was Richard and Patricia's audition for the big leagues. Ready? Henderson asked, adjusting his tie. Let's balance the books, I said. We walked past the catering vans and through the wrought iron gates. The garden was transformed. White tents, crystal chandeliers suspended from the oaks, and a crowd of 300 people in linen and silk. At the front near the fountain stood my family. Tyler was holding a champagne flute beaming. Richard had his arm around him. Patricia was adjusting Eloise's veil because apparently an engagement party required a veil now. I waited until the music softened, until Tyler raised his glass for the toast. To family, Tyler announced, his voice projecting across the silent garden. And to this incredible gift, my parents, they've given us not just a home but a legacy. Generations of ownership passing to the next. I'm honored to be the new steward of King Street. Applause rippled through the crowd. Eloise's father, a formidable man named Mr. Vance, nodded approvingly. I stepped out from behind the magnolia tree. That's a beautiful speech, Tyler, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden quiet it carried. There's just one problem. The crowd parted, my mother gasped. Richard's face went from benevolent patriarch to cornered animal in 3 seconds. Jasmine, Richard barked, stepping forward. You were told not to come. Security. I don't think security can help you, Richard, I said, walking toward them. I didn't look at my parents. I looked directly at Mr. Vance, because you can't gift a house you don't own. What is she talking about? Eloise asked, her smile faltering. She's jealous, Patricia hissed, rushing toward me. She's having a breakdown. Ignore her. I'm not jealous, I said, stopping 5 tea from the happy couple. I signaled Henderson. He stepped forward and handed a thick envelope to Richard. Then he handed a second copy to Tyler. You've been served, Henderson said. What is this? Tyler laughed nervously, looking at the papers. An eviction notice, Dad. What is this? It's a foreclosure notice, I clarified. From King Street Holdings, LLC, the entity that owns the deed to this property. Dad owns the property, Tyler stammered. Your father has been a tenant for 5 years, I said, my voice cutting through the humidity. King Street Holdings bought the distress note to save him from bankruptcy. And as the sole managing member of that LLC, I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was heavy enough to crush them. I am calling the loan due immediately. The twist hit the room like a physical wave. I saw the realization dawn on Mr. Vance's face. He looked at Richard, then at the papers. Then at me. You, Richard whispered, his face grey. You're the LLC, I'm the bank, I corrected. For a moment Richard tried to play it as a joke. He let out a loud, hollow laugh that echoed off the garden walls, trying to sell the idea that this was just some elaborate, eccentric prank. He turned to the crowd, raising his hands. My daughter, he announced, his voice cracking slightly. She has a very specific sense of humour. Always the dramatist, Jasmine, that's enough. We LL discuss your little investment later. He reached for the papers in Tyler's hand, trying to snatch them away, trying to hide the evidence before anyone could read the fine print. But he wasn't fast enough. Mr. Vance, a man who had built a commercial real estate empire by reading the fine print, stepped between them. He took the foreclosure notice from Tyler's trembling grip and put on his spectacles. The silence in the garden was absolute. 300 people. Billionaire audited my father's life in real time. Mr. Vance flipped the page. He scanned the deed history. He looked at the notarized signature on the promissory note. Richard's signature. This isn't a joke, Richard, Mr. Vance said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a judge passing sentence. This property was sold to King Street Holdings 5 years ago to avoid foreclosure. You don't own this estate. You're a tenant on a month-to-month lease. He turned to his daughter. Eloise, he tried to gift you a house he doesn't own. He said, it's fraud, Eloise, they are bankrupt. Eloise pulled her hand away from Tyler's arm like he burned her. She looked at the engagement ring on her finger, a ring I knew was bought on a credit card that was currently maxed out. And then she looked at Patricia. My mother was frozen, her face a mask of crumbling plaster. The social currency she had hoarded for 30 years evaporated in 10 seconds. Get out, Richard screamed, pivoting back to me. The mask of the benevolent patriarch fell away, revealing the cornered, angry man underneath. You ungrateful, spiteful child, get off my property, I want you gone, security, remove her. The security guards my mother had hired shifted uncomfortably, looking from Richard to me. They didn't move. They can't remove me, Richard, I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. Because this isn't your property, you can't order me off my own land. I nodded to Henderson. He lifted his hand, signaling the 2 uniformed officers who had been waiting quietly by the gate. They walked into the garden. The heavy thud of their boots on the stone path, the only sound. Officers, I said, I am the owner of this property. These people are trespassing. I have terminated their lease effective immediately for non-payment and breach of contract. I would like everyone removed from the premises. The guests didn't wait to be told twice. It was a stampede of silk and linen. The friends my parents had cultivated for decades turned their backs and walked away without a word. Mr. Vance took Eloise's arm and marched her toward the exit, leaving Tyler standing alone at the altar of his own entitlement. Richard slumped against the fountain, watching his audience disappear. He looked at me one last time, his eyes full of hate. You destroyed this family, he spat. No, I corrected him. I just audited it. The weeks following the gala were quiet. It was the specific, heavy silence of a structure that has finally collapsed. In Charleston, gossip moves faster than humidity, and my family's social standing disintegrated within 48 hours. The foreclosure notice wasn't just a legal document. It was a death certificate for their reputation. My parents didn't fight the eviction. They couldn't. Without the illusion of ownership, they had no leverage, no credit, and nowhere to hide. They packed their lives into a rented moving truck. No movers this time, just Richard and Patricia heaving boxes of silver and china. They had no room to display. They moved into a 2-bedroom condo in West Ashley, far from the historic district, and the eyes of the people they had spent a lifetime trying to impress. Tyler didn't fare any better. Once the legacy asset evaporated, so did his engagement. Eloise returned the ring via courier. 3 days after the party, her father sent a brief, terrifyingly polite letter to my attorney stating that any further contact from the Dawson family would be considered harassment. Was left with nothing but a leased BMW he couldn't afford and a resume full of imaginary job titles. A month after the locks were changed, I walked through 42 King Street alone. The house was empty, the furniture was gone, the drapes were down, and the echo of my footsteps on the heart-pine floors was the only sound. I thought I would feel triumphant. I thought standing in the center of the ballroom where I had been erased would feel like victory. Instead, I just felt light. The house was beautiful, yes, the afternoon light filtering through the dust mows was exquisite, but it was cold. It still smelled faintly of old paper and desperation. I realized then that I could never live here. This wasn't a home. It was a mausoleum to a lie. If I moved in, I would just be the next warden of the estate, trapped by the same walls that had suffocated my parents. I walked to the window where my father had stood so many times looking out at the street he thought he owned. I didn't want his view. I didn't want his legacy. I took the keys out of my pocket and placed them on the mantel. I wasn't going to keep the house. I was going to liquidate it. I sold the estate to the historic Charleston Foundation 6 weeks later. They planned to turn it into a museum of Southern architecture, which felt fitting. It would finally be a place where history was preserved honestly rather than used as a mask. The sale price after paying off the remainder of the note, and the closing costs left a surplus of nearly $400,000. I didn't keep the money, I didn't need it. My career was thriving and my own accounts were healthy. Instead, I used the proceeds to establish the Jasmine Dawson Scholarship for Financial Independence. It is a full-ride grant designed specifically for women studying forensic accounting and financial law, women who are escaping financial abuse or coercive control. There is a philosophy I have come to live by: the justice of the sewer. Revenge is often misunderstood as destruction. People think it means burning the field so your enemy starves, but true justice isn't about ash. It is about taking the resources that were being hoarded by the unworthy and replanting them in fertile ground. My parents used that money to build a facade. I am using it to build a future. Every semester when I sign the check for a new student, I am not just helping a stranger. I am rewriting the ending of my own story. I am ensuring that the next time a woman finds a foreclosure notice hidden in a drawer, she won't have to buy her safety. She will have the skills to demand it. I still have the ledger. It sits on the shelf in my office, a heavy black book filled with the math of my liberation. I don't open it anymore. I don't need to check the balance. The debt is paid, the accounts are closed, and for the first time in my life I am not looking at the cost, I am looking at the value. If you have ever had to buy your own freedom from the people who were supposed to protect you, share this story. Let's remind the world that family is defined by behavior, not biology. Subscribe for more stories of justice, and remember, never let anyone tell you that you are too cold for knowing your own.